Ferguson, Missouri, where police released images of someone who might be Michael Brown involved in a store robbery. And then hours later said the robbery had nothing to do with why Michael Brown was stopped by the police officer who killed him. Ferguson is just outside St. Louis, Missouri, the place where, as historian Blair Kelly reminded us this week in The Root, Dred Scott sued for his freedom on the grounds that he and his wife had for many years lived in a free state. His case eventually went to the Supreme Court, and in 1857, Chief Justice Roger Taney declared that Scott had no right to sue because, as a black man, he was never intended to be an American. Speaking on the clause in the Declaration of Independence that all men are created equal, Taney wrote, quote, "It is too clear for dispute that the enslaved African race were not intended to be included and formed no part of the people who framed and adopted this declaration." And he went on to say that black men had no rights which the white man was bound to respect. No rights which the white man was bound to respect. No rights which the white man was bound to respect. No rights which the white man was bound to respect.
Peace. I'm Rami Salam Eth. Much love to everybody right now. This standing up, this tide of the injustices that's going on, this tide of the domestic terrorism at the hands of these public servants that are posing as officers. No, it's not police brutality. There's no such thing. It's not racism. It's genocide. It's human rights violations. Okay? We have to be correct. We have to know what we're talking about. I'm gonna cut to the chase, okay? This is a Black's Law Dictionary, 4th edition. This dictionary is what all lawyers, attorneys, judges, anybody that knows law, they study this dictionary. Because words in law, they don't necessarily mean the same thing as they do in culture. In culture, in society, we can say, oh, black people. And we know who we're speaking about. But in law, when you call yourself black, you're calling yourself a Negro. Don't believe me. Looked it up for you. Page 1188. Negro. The word Negro means a black man, one descended from the African race. Okay? Black man and Negro are synonymous. Negro is a slave. Black man means you're calling yourself a slave. Now, in my opinion, not how I feel about it, but what it means in law. And slaves, as we know, are not citizens and do not have rights, because slaves are property. Don't believe me. Again, this is not my opinion. This is not how I feel. It's not what I just came up with today. This is a fact in law. Dred Scott, D-R-E-D, Scott, S-C-O-T-T. Look it up. See what the Supreme Court had to say. The highest court of the land. And their decision has never been overturned.
In 1857, the Supreme Court was a decidedly partisan institution. Of the 9 Supreme Court justices, 7 were pro-slavery Democrats. 5 came from slaveholding families. Their desire to secure the rights of slaveholders would cause them to make the most infamous judicial decision in American history. The man who started it all was named Dred Scott.
Dred Scott was a slave born in Virginia. His master ultimately moves him to St. Louis, where he is sold a couple of times and ultimately ends up in the hands of a man named John Emerson. John Emerson is an army surgeon. And when John Emerson is posted to various frontier forts, the first one is in what is today Rock Island, Illinois, he takes Dred Scott with him as his servant. Now, presumably, Dred Scott becomes free the moment he's taken to Rock Island, because Rock Island is in Illinois. It's called Fort Armstrong at the time. But Dred Scott remains a slave at Fort Armstrong. And then his master takes him to Fort Snelling, which is today St. Paul, Minnesota. Now, that is the area that was made free under the Missouri Compromise.
Several years later, Dred Scott returned to St. Louis with his master. But after Emerson died, Scott sued for his freedom on the grounds that since he had lived in free territory, he was no longer a slave. A jury of 12 white men in a St. Louis circuit court judged him legally free.
2 years later, the Missouri Supreme Court reverses this. They reverse precedents going back to the beginning of Missouri statehood. And they are very frank about it. They say times have changed.
When John Emerson's widow remarried, she transferred ownership of Dred Scott to her brother, John Sanford.
John Sanford lives in New York, but has business interests in St. Louis. And so now Dred Scott can sue in federal court alleging he is a citizen of Missouri, his owner is a citizen of New York. And that's how the case goes forward to the Supreme Court.
No suit pressed by a slave had ever come before the Supreme Court before. It raised important questions.
The lawyers representing John Sanford made the argument that no black person can sue in federal court because black people can't be citizens of the United States.
The majority opinion in Dred Scott was written by Chief Justice Roger Taney. Taney was a resolute foe of racial equality, the Republican Party, and the anti-slavery movement.
Chief Justice Taney begins by saying Dred Scott can't sue because blacks can't be citizens. And he makes a very famous statement. He says at the time of the Constitution, they had no rights, they meaning blacks, had no rights that the white people needed to respect. Now,
yes, you watching right now. Until you look it up for yourself and know it for yourself, we will continue in this cycle. And a special message to my European brothers and sisters. We need you to speak up as well. You can't be afraid either. The karmic debt is going to be paid. And if you stay silent now, you will have to pay later. If you know, speak up. Let the so-called black man and the so-called black woman, the so-called African Americans, let them know that they have a nationality and they need to go study Noble Drew Ali, because he is the one that was bringing us the truth. You ain't got to do much more than that. We don't need anyone. We don't need any more people dying. We don't need any more martyrs. Truthfully, we don't even need to be doing any more marching. Because if everybody that was on those streets said, you know what, tomorrow I'm proclaiming my nationality in front of the courthouse, in front of every so-called police officer, guess what would happen? The world would change. Everybody's waiting on us. Nations all around the world.
Is that so-called African Americans, black people and all members of the so-called black race have no rights according to law, and are still considered 3/5 of a human according to law. Now, slavery is unlawful and has been condemned by the American government, but voluntary slavery is 100% legal, and by tricking the masses of so-called black Americans to agree to claim to be African American and black, they have agreed to have privileges as opposed to rights, and all slaves, according to those laws, were considered 3/5 human. Now, it is a great Masonic secret that has long been revealed that it was George Washington who chopped down the cherry tree of the Moors, erasing them from the history books and removing their nationality, fez and turbans. It was even predicted that in a few hundred years many of them would not remember who they were or their connection to the land. It was Morocco who supported and gave rise to the independence of the United States of America as it has been recognized by President Obama.
Nationality is the answer for all of our issues, all of our problems, all of the injustices that we are seeing going on. Will you step up? Will you proclaim your nationality? Or will you stay a slave? The choice is yours.